in our nation's history were from Republican presidents, Reagan and Bush. And so now the Republicans are suddenly waxing sacrosanct on no new taxes. When I was a kid, and I think you're about my age, the top tax on the richest people was over 90%. Now, I'm not advocating a return to a 90% tax rate for the richest Americans, but since you and I have grown up, America's grown increasingly unequal. The rich are getting richer far faster than the middle class are improving, or the poor. We're getting an increasingly third world type of inequality with mansions for the rich behind gated communities and middle working class people losing jobs, losing insurance, losing the standard of living that they had come to expect. Are you willing to consider a modest tax hike on the very wealthy who right now spend it all in the Hamptons on Long Island and yachts and overseas travel and fur and things like this, instead of having them share the cost of the excesses of the 90s and 2000s? Thank you.
Here, here. Amen.
Let me, first a couple of facts about federal spending that I think might shed some light on what's been happening. Now, this is a chart that wasn't produced by me. It's by the Peter G. Peterson Foundation, and it's being promoted by Walker, his first name, David Walker, who was former GAO officer. Nonpartisan groups basically focused on the deficit. What it shows is the growth in federal spending as a percentage of the economy. When we were a new and young country, the federal government was almost a non-event. It spent 2% of the total economy. By 2011, the government's spending 25%. So the federal government alone, is taking 25% of the resources out of the economy and allocating it as politicians see fit, rather than the people who earn it. We're on a path, if we don't change the path that we're on, by 2040, to have virtually 40% of the economy controlled by the government. I'm telling you, I think this is a recipe for the kind of disaster that we are watching unfolding in Western Europe. They have gone down this road, they are ahead of us on this road of an ever larger government, ever heavier taxes. They have had, as a result, stagnant economic growth, permanent unemployment that is higher than ours has been historically, a lower standard of living, and now what we're seeing in Europe, as they have reached the point where they can no longer borrow to cover the big deficits that they've been running, we're seeing social unrest and this gradual unwinding of their societies.
This is Southern Europe, not Germany.
You made a commentary about your view of how this has transpired, and I respect your opinion on it. But I am very concerned that if we continue down this path and we say we're just going to keep raising taxes on some Americans and make them pay for this ever-growing share of government, we're going to have slower economic growth. We're going to diminish the incentives to take risk, to expand the business, to innovate. And the secret to the great success of the American economy and our society has been the growth in the private sector, the innovation, the dynamism that we have had. And I am concerned that we will stifle that if we just say, let's just lock in this. By the way, as recently as 2007, with the current tax rates, the budget deficit was 1.2% of GDP. Really a tiny number. Today it's almost 10% of GDP with the same exact tax rates. It's because spending has ballooned. I think we've got to get spending under control. So I understand your point.
Spending has ballooned, but tax collection have fallen.
That's right. That's part of it. Because the economy contracted, that naturally tends to reduce the total revenue taken in from taxes. But my point is, if we have strong economic growth, the revenue will come back because we have the same rates that we had in 2007. And if we had fiscal discipline on the spending side, we'd be able to bring our budget to balance. I think that's the direction we should head in. I am concerned that if we instead decide to lock in this big spending with a big tax increase, we will damage our prospects for economic growth. And in fact, might just encourage politicians to spend that much more. And I just don't think that's the right path for our economy. Somebody who hasn't had a chance, maybe.
Good afternoon, Senator. Welcome to Potter County. My name is Eric Ross, and I'm a small business owner, and I work with small businesses in McKean County and Potter County. And some of the things that you've said here certainly resonate, and some of the things that, some of the comments from the crowd. One of the things that I run into over and over again is, we have small businesses who are trying to grow, who are prevented from growing in a lot of ways due to the kinds of unfunded mandates that you've talked about, that have been talked about here. They are essentially what's preventing them from growing and hiring people, creating jobs, is that the government won't get out of the way. The government needs to step aside where it's not needed. Obviously, we need to have safe drinking water, we need to have safe products, but there's too many ways in which the government, and I experience it in my own business, and I experience it with my clients' businesses, the government just has too much involvement, there's too much regulation. They need to get out of the way, and I'm interested in hearing what you have to say and what you're doing to accomplish that.
Yeah, I mean, the handout that I sent around has a short list. It's a very long list about the things that I've been trying to do to reduce these mandates. I mentioned the street signs on the municipality, something that's modest. There's a regulation that would require farmers who drive tractors to get commercial driver licenses. Talk about a solution in search of a problem. Why do we need that? Well, it's a cost to them, it's bad for our economy, we don't need that. I support efforts to repeal that. The EPA, I think I mentioned earlier, that I've introduced a bill that will require the EPA to consider the jobs lost before they're allowed to issue a new regulation. I'm a co-sponsor of a bill by Ron Johnson, a freshman, a senator from Wisconsin, a businessman, who's introduced a bill that would put a moratorium on new regulations until the unemployment rate drops some. Because the new avalanche we've already got is doing exactly what we described. The medical device tax, I mentioned that. The 1099, this was a small bill that we had. You may recall from the health care bill, the Obamacare bill, would require every business to file a 1099 with the IRS every time they have $600 worth of purchases of anything. You stop and think about that. That, over the course of a year, you can think about $600 worth of gas. You have to keep track of the gas stations you go to. As a small business, I used to be a small business guy. I know that small businesses don't have the resources to do that. It ends up meaning they wouldn't be able to hire. We got that repealed. I mentioned the regulatory moratorium bill. The EPA is trying to impose cap and trade through the back door. They are. It's a terrible idea. It's going to be devastating to industrial America and industrial Pennsylvania. So I've signed on to a bill by Jim Inhofe, Senator from Oklahoma, to prevent that. It's a big part of what I do. I think that the regulatory excesses are having a big impact. It's a very negative impact on our economy. And if you've got specific examples, I would love to work with you on how we can. One other example, because this is having an impact right now in Pennsylvania. The EPA is proposing whole new ozone control levels. Now, we've made a lot of progress in reducing ozone levels, and I'm glad we did. I think it's appropriate. But they want to establish whole new levels. And if they have their way, most of Pennsylvania becomes out of attainment. What that means is, and in anticipation of that, Carpenter Technology, a specialty steel company in Berks County, announced that they're going to build a new plant, but it's not going to be in Pennsylvania because the added cost that they would have for building that plant in Pennsylvania make it prohibitively expensive. They're going to build, but it's going to be in another state. This is the kind of thing that I'm fighting every day. And if you've got a specific example, I'd love to hear it, and I'd love to work with you to try to prevent it from happening.
I'm Sean from Pittsburgh. I have one question. It's been said that you are with cutting Medicare, Medicaid, and how is that going to get us more jobs by cutting, programs that we need? Also, I have a big problem with the education system because our schools are closing really fast, and our next generation isn't getting the education that they need to get a good job.
Yeah, let me, I'm going to try to find a chart here that's going to illustrate something that's pretty important. Yeah. Here's, when you get into the composition of where all our tax dollars go and the dollars that we borrow, right? Where's federal spending going? In 1970, the portion that went to Medicare and Medicaid was 4%. The big number here, 42%, was defense. You know, it used to be that that was the biggest activity of the federal government. Now, defense is only 20% of what the government spends. Medicare and Medicaid alone are 23%. That's a stunning change when the government goes from 1 out of $25 being spent on Medicare and Medicaid to 1 in 4. You've got something that's unsustainable. We can't just continue that. There's another chart. We can find it. It's towards the end. And here it is.
I'm getting warm.
This is another way of looking at the different categories. Again, these aren't my numbers. These are from the Cedar Peterson Foundation. And they show the percent, this is in terms of the percent of our economy, not the percent of our budget, the percent of our economy that's devoted to some of these categories. By 2022, according to the Peterson calculations, the interest on our debt, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, those 3 items will consume all tax revenue. Well, how do we operate? We wouldn't have anything left over for education, healthcare, defense, air traffic controllers, roads, bridges, you name it, right? So my point is, we're on a path where this can't possibly go on. But no category of the spending can grow faster than the economy grows over time without consuming the whole budget. So all I'm saying is, we need to change the way we do these things. Fortunately, I think we can do it without harming the delivery of healthcare services to the elderly and the poor. Medicare covers healthcare for the elderly, Medicaid for the poor. And one of the things that I've advocated with respect to Medicaid, I think the design is badly flawed, the way we handle this. The incentives are all wrong. What we ought to do is take this program, block grant the funds to the states, and let the states figure out better ways to deliver healthcare services to poor people. We did that with welfare reform in the 1990s, and it worked. It worked. We had some states, actually early on in the process, it was Wisconsin, that showed the way to making some really constructive changes in welfare. We don't have all the answers in Washington, and we're on a totally unsustainable path. So that's why I think here's something that we can do. Let the states figure out a better way. The federal government can supplement the cost, but we certainly haven't got this figured out. With Medicare, I have argued, I've got 2 parents who are on Medicare. And this is a very, very important program for seniors, no question about it. Medicare is not sustainable in its current form, and it's already being squeezed badly. When I talk to my parents, I am shocked at how long it takes them to get in to see a doctor. The waits they have are horrendous. You know, you can't call your doctor and have a conversation over the phone. Whoever gets a chance to do that? Or exchange an email. There's all kinds of ordinary, normal ways that we do business in every other walk of life. But you can't do it in healthcare because the government doesn't allow it. So we've got to change the way we deliver these services. That's what I'm saying. I have supported an alternative model for Medicare. I'm open to other suggestions, but I want us to get on a path where it's sustainable, where we're not just ratcheting back. There are ever more doctors refusing to take new Medicare patients because the reimbursements are so low, they lose money, so they say, fine, I won't take any more patients. So senior citizens are already finding it more and more difficult to get access to health care. And President Obama has called for cutting $500 billion from the program over the next 10 years. What's that going to do to access? So my point is, the status quo is not working. And we've got to make some changes. I've advocated that we make changes not for the people who are currently in the program, but for younger people. People my age, I'm 49, people who are at least 10 years away from retirement. And we changed the model to one that is very much built on the same model that members of Congress get. Who thinks that I have a bad health care plan? I didn't see any hands go up. Well, this plan is modeled after the same idea. It says when you reach retirement age, when you reach the qualifying age, you will be able to select from among a group of approved, government-approved competing plans the insurance that you want. And then the government will provide the payment to the provider. And if you're rich, you won't get as much. If you're poor, you'll get more. If you're really healthy, you won't get quite as much. If you're sick, you'll get some more. I think that's a sensible way to design the program. And then the plans will compete for your business because they want as much business as they can get. Like I said, I'm open to other ways of solving this problem, but that's not sustainable. And that's why I think we've got to have an honest conversation about how we make changes, not for people who are currently in the program, but for the next generation that are going to be going into it.
Senator, I think it's unrealistic to expect that you can do an awful lot on your own. How confident do you feel this committee of 12 is going to be able to, knowing your colleagues, are going to be able to come together and achieve some fiscal direction for your recommendation?
You know, it's a great question. I don't know the answer. Yeah, you can't do anything on your own. You can only do things as part of a team. In government, you know, we've got divided government. We've got a House and a Senate and a President, and that's a good design. You know, it's designed to require a consensus before you do anything big. If this job that this committee's been given to find $1.5 trillion of savings or more over the next 10 years, if that job were easy, it would already been done. We got a lot of committees in Congress, right? I think we should have done it by now, but we didn't. And so I've been asked to be one of the guys to serve on this committee to try to get this done. I hope that my fellow committee members understand that there's more urgency now than there has ever been. We have never run up this kind of debt, with the exception of during World War II, and I think we all know why we ran it up then. And by the way, we quickly paid it down. We're not in a position to do that. We're not in a position to sustain this. We just got downgraded by S&P, which is shocking to me. We are seeing, you know, Europe spinning out of control in many places. I don't know what more we would need to focus our attention, to create the urgency. And I will say this, I think if the committee can agree on something that we can report out, and we can get it to pass both the House and the Senate, big ifs. But if we can, I'm pretty sure the President will sign it. And along the way, if it looks like we're heading that way, I hope the President will get involved and help us reach the consensus that he can make happen. It's too early for me to be able to predict whether or not we can do it, but it is my hope, and it will be, this is what I'm going to be working on the next couple of months.
Senator, we have time for 2 more, and let Dan have 1 because it's his birthday. One follow-up question.
Dan gets 2 questions. Excellent.
It's birthday. You got to keep it short. And it came from Philadelphia, 300 miles.
Came all the way from Philadelphia.
So I just want to follow up just a little bit on the numbers. So you're saying that we're going to run out of money, basically, the way it is to fund Medicare, well, or to fund any other program if Medicare and all that is going the way it's going, Social Security and whatnot. So, well, my thing is, you know, again, it comes back to the tax breaks. Okay, the corporations have these big tax breaks. Okay, they're not paying in, and the bottom line is, I'm still paying taxes. You guys don't want to raise their taxes, you know. So, you know, how is that going to? If we had that money coming in, that was stopped. You know, we had a surplus because of it before. You know, when Clinton left, when Clinton left, and afterwards, going back to what the gentleman from Tioga County said, it was gone because of all the tax breaks. Okay, I'm still paying taxes. So is everybody else. I'm paying it on unemployment. Okay. And now that, you know, talking about not raising corporations' taxes, but they also want to stop the federal tax breaks that we're getting now coming out of our paychecks, and that's actually just going to come on people like you know, the working class. So that's going to be, you know, causing taxes.
One thing we ought to follow up. If you're paying income taxes on your unemployment benefits, we should talk to you, because that's not the way the tax code works.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
You always pay.
But you look at the total income that you have over a period of time, and you know, if your income is
Obviously, you've never collected unemployment,
it's
sir.
very likely that you're going to reach a level that's going to be subject to income taxes. Let me just illustrate the corporate side of this for a second. This is, again, these aren't my numbers, these are David Walker's numbers. This is the effective corporate tax rate. It's not the nominal rate, it's not the top rate that's charged on the last dollar earned, but it's after all the deductions, after all the provisions, what's the effective rate that countries charge on their corporations. And you can see the rates vary. The average effective rate is about 21%. The United States is the second highest. We are at just below 30%. Our nominal rate is actually 35, but because there are different rates in the system. And here's what's worst about this. It's necessarily the case, because of all the perversities in the tax code, that you get some companies are paying at 35, others are paying 0. The net average effective rate is 28. But look, all of our competitors pay less. And so we currently have a situation where a multinational corporation deciding where to headquarter their business and where to have lots of jobs, it makes a lot of sense for them to be somewhere other than the United States. Because that way, they have lower taxes and they can return more money to their shareholders.
But
So what I'm saying,
But Senator, those companies that are not paying taxes, they're also getting federal refunds at the end of the year.
well, and I'm the one that said that the most indefensible thing in the tax code is when a big profitable company doesn't pay any taxes. I'm not defending that. That's ridiculous. We should get rid of the kinds of features that allow that to happen. They should be required to pay taxes. What I want to do is simplify the code, get rid of all these special favors for special interest groups, lower marginal rates accordingly so that we get down to somewhere closer to the average. That makes us more competitive, and that means more jobs in the United States.
If you didn't get a question, if you see me, if you want to get an email, we will get you an answer. We only have time for one more, and the media availability is in the back after the 210 media availability. Sir, you had a question? Yes.
Yes. More of a comment, Senator, than a question. I think that as a citizen, I watch TV, I listen to the news, I see polls that are done, and I know 80% of the American people, or maybe a little better, have an unfavorable attitude toward Congress. I think part of that was a military man. Leadership starts at the top and not the bottom. During the budget hassle, we kept hearing President Obama threaten the veterans and the Social Security recipients of not getting checks. I never did hear him say anything about laying off White House staff, grounding Air Force One, or cutting back on the House and the Senate and what they do or don't do. And I think that if we're going to reestablish and put trust in our government, I wish you luck on your committee. I think back to Peter Drucker, who was a management consultant, and his comment was, if the world had been created by committee, we would still not be here. And so I wish you luck in your committee in getting something done. That we've seen so many committees with nothing happening. One just recently that the president had on the debt reduction committee, and nothing happened. Yet there's money wasted, money spent, nothing done. And that we need effective leadership coming from Washington.
Exactly.
If we're going to get people to cooperate with the government, to support the government, and to pay taxes. And I think a lot of our agencies that are there, I looked at the list the other day, there's probably over 200 agencies that the government's funding. You could probably do away with half of them and nobody would ever miss them. I look at some of the things that are happening like Freddie and Fannie, and it's supposed to have an oversight committee. It's obvious how effective the oversight committee was in controlling what they're doing. I think EPA is some of the same thing. I look at the Department of Energy was established in the 70s because of the energy crisis. Gas was less than $1 a gallon now. They've succeeded in getting us up to, well, $3 a gallon more than it was then. And so what are they really doing? And are they effective? Should we continue to fund them? And it looks to me like EPA, it looks like the tail wagging the dog, that they're getting their own way in what they want to do. And instead of being proactive, the Senate, the House is being reacting to what they're doing and not doing. And I think that it's time for government, for our representatives, to show the leadership and to take control of the government, rather than letting all of these other agencies run the government for them, and you only reacting to what they're doing. That's my comment.
Well, thanks. I think Congress deserves a lot of blame for passing a lot of bills where they empowered the bureaucracies to then write these extensive rules that amount to laws. And Congress doesn't take the responsibility and the time to devise it themselves. Instead, there's always this temptation to, oh, let's have the regulators develop the rules on that. You know, those tough decisions should be made by the people who are elected and are held accountable, not just pushed off on somebody else. So I completely agree with that. Hey, thank you very much for your patience and for your input. I appreciate it, and I want to just underscore what Bob said. If you had a question and we didn't get to it, I apologize, but we will answer by email, and any suggestions you have are always welcome. Thanks again.